Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do an edge-to-edge quilting design. You're going to see on what I've got in my machine right now is some designs that have already been stitched out. This is what the template looks like for the embroidery design. You can see that it's a very simple, just straight stitch design. It's going to stitch out in approximately 2 minutes. So this is the procedure for doing this. Your first thing that you're going to want to do is mark your quilt for the vertical, horizontal and vertical lines. And you can just do that with a chalk marker because you're going to have to be marking each row individually as you get to the point where you're going to actually stitch it out. There's no real point in trying to map this all out in the beginning, and that's why I say that. A template is going to be helpful, and it's mainly going to be helpful so that you can get the measurement that you need from top to the center of the design, okay? Because your marks that you're going to be putting onto the hoop are going to be spaced out according to the overall size of the template. The most critical thing is that you're going to be looking at your horizontal mark, and that's how your designs are going to be lined up on your fabric. In a second, that's going to make more sense to you. I'm using my homemade magnetic hoop here, and so what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to get ready to show you how to hoop up the next design. You can see that I'm already almost completed with this project. I don't really need the template at this point because my marks on my fabric have already been done. So this is what I do. On my machine, I've got the design pulled up. What I'm going to do is move to stitch number 1. And I'm just going to hit the plus button. The hoop has moved to position number 1, and I'm just going to make sure that I'm hooked on to the machine. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to move my quilt so that where the needle is at is going to be at the end of the previously stitched design, because these designs are all matched up. All right, so what I'm going to do is find that end of that design. I'm going to hope my hands aren't in the way, and I'm just going to bury my needle down into the fabric at that point. That's giving me a starting point over here. It's also securing my fabric so that I can then use my little wooden hoop here to squish down my quilt so that I can attach my magnets. Okay, so does that make sense to you? The next thing I'm looking at is that the center horizontal marks on my frame are going to be on the very faint line, which is my chalk marked line on my quilt. So I'm just adjusting my fabric so that those lines are also matched up, and then I'm ready to start putting my magnets onto the hoop. I like to go with opposite sides first because that just kind of helps it all stay together. Kind of stretch it a little bit. You don't want a whole lot of extra movement going on in here. All right, hope my hands are showing up here really well. All right, so now what I'm going to do is raise my needle up out of my fabric, and the next thing I'm going to do is just double check that that position has not moved. As I drop my needle down in here, it's still right on with where I want it to be. All right, so what I'm going to do is manually use my needle up and down so that I can pull up my bobbin thread, and I'm going to hold my ends of my thread out of the way, and I'm just going to go ahead and start embroidering. One of the things that you're going to want to have to do also is using your adjustments on your machine. You're going to want to raise up the presser foot so that it's just hovering up above the surface of the quilt. You don't want it to be pushing the fabric around. So this is going to stitch really fast, and we'll just watch it stitching because I want to show you how it's going to finish up and then how to set up for the next hooping. The next hooping is actually just what I just showed you. You're not going to be able to see all of this stitching very well because I'm stitching out with white thread, and some of the parts of my fabric are also quite light. But you're getting the idea of how it is stitching out, and it kind of gives you a nice little interlocking design where it looks almost like you free motioned this or did a long arm job on it. We're almost to the end of the design. All right, just about there. It's coming back around to the end. It knots off. What I'm going to do now is The hoop has moved back to the center of this design, but what I'd like to do at this point is I unhook my hoop from the machine, from the arm, and I just move it away a little distance so that I have longer thread tails here. And then I use the thread cutter on the machine to cut those tails. The reason why I want to do that is even though the design has tie-ins and tie-offs, also known as knots, I do like to go ahead and thread these thread tails onto a needle, a hand sewing needle, and I like to bury them between the layers. All right, so just to review, what we would then do is that we would come over to our machine, we would select our edit mode, and what we want to do is we want to center that design back into the center of the hoop because we jogged it, okay, just a little bit. And then we're going to be ready to set up for the next hooping. All right, so what's the steps? You would go to stitch number 1 so that the hoop is moved to stitch number 1. I'm going to go ahead and put my hoop back on the machine. All right, I would unhook my magnets. Now you could be using your regular ASQ22 hoop with its magnets that it comes with, or the homemade version that I'm doing here. And then I would just go ahead and start the process over again. It is at stitch number 1 because I told the machine to move there, and I would just go ahead and find the end of that last motif, bury my needle at that point, and then continue on like I just already showed you. All right, and that's how simple it is to do a continuous quilting design on a quilt using the homemade wooden frame and the magnets that Manny made for us. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, that's it for now. Bye-bye.